in the air if you've heard it before. Most of you, it was a brand new song. It talked in that song a little bit about grace, God's grace pouring down on us. And it has that great chorus, I guess it's the bridge there actually in the song. It says, we're free, free, forever we're free. Jesus can set us free. He can give us a new life. We've been talking about Jesus every week, forever in this church, because that's what we talk about. Jesus is the one. He can set us free. Grace is the gift of God. It's God pouring out things on us that we don't deserve, but because he loves us and because of what Jesus has done for us, Jesus died on a cross so that our sins could be forgiven and we could have a real relationship with God. That means we can know him and he'll actually do things in our life. That's what grace is. God doing stuff for us that we don't deserve. We can actually have a whole new life. Today we're talking about Jesus. We're in a sermon series called Get to Know What Jesus Really Taught. We're in a book in the Bible, part of the Bible called the book of Luke, that is a story written from eyewitnesses, people who were actually there. This guy Luke collected all these eyewitness accounts of what happened during Jesus' life. And what we're doing now is going through that book and looking at all the different things that Jesus taught. And we're talking about those teachings. Jesus had a lot to say about who we could become. We talked about, back at Christmas time, I don't know if you remember, the baby Jesus. We talked about how the baby Jesus was actually an invasion of the earth. Jesus was born to sort of declare war on evil. He came into the world not just to hang out or not just to make us feel good, but to actually defeat the power of evil that takes over every human life and binds us and holds us from becoming what we were created to be. Partly because of our own choices, but partly because spiritual evil in this world is real. Jesus comes to set us free from that, so he declared war on this. And in these teachings that we've been looking at, he's taught us a number of things about the kind of people we can become, people actually like him, if we truly enter into a relationship with God, by trusting him, by following him. What are some of the things that we've learned so far in this series? Get to know what Jesus really taught. Can anybody shout out? This is going to be a little bit interactive. I really have a goal today of keeping you guys awake. So somebody shout out, what's one of the things that we've learned so far from Jesus? One of the teachings. What was the first one? What was lesson number 1? Anybody remember that one? Jesus 101. If you're going to think about what kinds of things did Jesus teach, what's like the most basic thing that he taught? Probably the most often. Love each other, right? In particular, love other people as much as you love yourself, and even love your enemies. That's actually an impossible thing to do without God's help. Say yes if you agree that that's true. It's impossible to love someone who is your enemy without God's help. But with God's help, you can do it. And that sort of thing, loving your enemy, changes the world. It defeats the power of evil. He talked about loving your enemies. He's taught us about becoming a person who's generous and overflowing. He talked about actually dealing with where we're really at, accepting the fact that we're messed up on the inside. The bad stuff that I do isn't everybody else's fault. It's my fault. Actually accepting that. He's talked about what it takes to keep growing. You need to clear distractions and keep following after God. He talked about prayer and what it's like to have a real relationship with God. We looked at that last week. God is your Father. He loves you. You can talk to him because of what Jesus has done. You can just talk to God and he will listen to you. If you ask him and keep on asking, if you don't know whether God is real, you're actually unsure, and you're here today, you can be sure. You can find out. All you have to do is keep on asking him to show you that he's real, and he will do it, and then you'll know. You don't have to remain unsure. So today, we're going into the next teaching in this book of Luke, and we're in chapter 11. We're in the second section of chapter 11, which starts at verse 14. And this teaching is actually pretty intense. Jesus was very intense very often. So Sorry if you came for just a nice, happy, clappy, feel good, warm, fuzzy message. It might not be that today. I'll try not to, insult you too badly. But, okay, so the message today is called The Only Safe Place. So let's put that, I got a picture up that goes with that message, the title of the message today, The Only Safe Place. Have any of you guys seen this image before? Some of you have. It's pretty famous. It's an image of a lighthouse. I might have even used it here before. It's an image of a lighthouse, and it's actually in the North Atlantic. It's a French lighthouse, and this is a picture that was snapped from a helicopter in 1989. And what you see is there's a storm happening, and there's this massive wave about to engulf the lighthouse. And the lighthouse keeper is just chilling in the doorway. He didn't die. It's fantastic. Yeah. What happened is he was inside. He had everything locked and he was inside, and he heard a helicopter outside, and he thought it might be a rescue helicopter. So he actually opened the door to see and popped his head out to see what was going on, and it was just like a news media helicopter. And so then he ran back inside right after this, and he was saved. Okay? But the only safe place, you can see that in this image, there's only one safe place to be, isn't there? When the storm is raging, there's only one safe place to be. We often sing a song, we have in the past, describing Jesus as my lighthouse, right? Inside that lighthouse is the only safe place to be at this moment, isn't it? When that wave is crashing around you. The only safe place. This is going to be a story today. I'm going to read the section for you in just a minute in Luke chapter 11. This is going to be a story about 3 different kinds of people. Jesus, we're about to read, Jesus has been doing miracles. He's actually been helping people, praying for them, healing them of different diseases, helping them overcome things in their life, driving out evil from their lives. The Bible describes that, driving out demons, evil forces from their lives. Jesus has been doing this in a very public way that everybody acknowledged. Everybody who saw it knew that it was something miraculous, something amazing that Jesus was doing. And there's a huge crowd around him. And there's 3 different kinds of people in this crowd. We're going to talk about exactly what those 3 different groups of people are, and Jesus has some very clear things to say to these 3 different groups of people. It's important to recognize as we go into this that these 3 different kinds of people he's talking to are all people who know that Jesus is who he says he is. They're all people who have seen his power, and they can't deny it. They're not people who really aren't sure yet. Okay? So as we go through this message, Jesus is not talking about people who genuinely aren't sure yet if he is the Son of God or if God is even real. He's not talking about those people. He's talking about people who have seen and who know. Okay? And 3 different kinds of these people. Now, there's just coincidentally, luckily, graciously, there's 3 different sections of the room today. All right. So you guys are going to get to choose which group of people you're going to represent. All right. And I'll give you a chance as we go through the message. All right. So let's read the beginning of this section. We're going to start reading in Luke chapter 11, verse 14. I'll read a couple pieces for you here, just the first few verses. And there's going to be some weird words in here. All right? So if you're not familiar with the Bible, the weirdest word that you're going to find in here is the word Beelzebul. Can you say that 3 times fast? Beelzebul. All right, a super weird word. I'll explain what it means in just a minute. All right, so chapter 11, Luke, verse 14. Jesus was driving out a demon that was mute. That means the person couldn't speak. When the demon left, the man who had been mute spoke. And the crowd was amazed. Yeah, no kidding. They were always amazed when he did these incredible miracles right in front of people. But some of them said, it's by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that Jesus is driving out demons. And others tested him by asking for a sign from heaven. Okay, let's stop right there for a minute. And let's talk a little bit about Beelzebul and this first group of people. Okay? Is it cutting out? Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah? There's a lot of static. Should I change? Okay, let's change. Okay, Let's talk about Beelzebul. So in this section, we have Jesus driving out a demon. We have Jesus driving out a demon. So he's driven out a demon that's mute. And then these people say to him, some of them are his opponents, and they say, it's by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that you're driving out demons. Okay? It's not by God's power, it's by evil spiritual power, by the power of Satan, that you're able to do these miracles. That's what they say about Jesus. And Jesus is about to respond to that. But first thing we need is these people, this first group of people, we're going to call these people the opponents, okay? So there are three, this is actually point number 2. I'll come back to point number 1 in a minute. In your little bulletin, and you've got an insert in your bulletin where you can write in, this is again something so you can stay awake, you can write in the points of the message. There are three kinds of people in this story. The first one is the opponent. All right, now which group wants to represent the opponents? Yes, okay, you guys got it. All right, so you guys are the opponents. It's just the first person to respond that gets to make the choice. All right, good job, Pastor Jason. All right, so you guys are the opponents, all right? So I want you to take your hand, all of the opponents, and put your hand in the air like this fist, and I want you to say, Beelzebul. Okay, Beelzebul, all right. Okay. Now that you've been marked as the opponents and the people who are going to say Beelzebul, let's say a little bit about what Beelzebul means. This is an aside in the sermon, in the message. This is not the main point of the message, but it's kind of hilarious, so I have to share it with you. I needed to research this week. I'm like, it says Beelzebul. Why do they always use this term? The Jewish people 2,000 years ago used this term Beelzebul. Okay. Beelzebul, when the Jewish people first came into the promised land, into the land of what's now Israel, a long time before this, there were a whole bunch of other groups in the land who were worshiping all kinds of really evil local gods, okay? These gods required, some of them required human sacrifice, all kinds of bad stuff. So these gods were pretty clearly what we would call demons. They were evil, okay? And there's this one group of people in that region who spoke a language that was very similar to what the people of Israel spoke, very similar to Hebrew. So they could probably even understand each other a little bit, right? Maybe something like Spanish and Portuguese, okay? So they could understand each other a little bit. And in this language, this group of people worshipped a god called Beelzebul, all right? And in their language, Beelzebul meant the god of the high places, because they would worship him up on top, do a bunch of bad stuff to worship him up on top of a hill. Okay? But in Hebrew, the words Beelzebul sound just like the words for Lord of Dung. That's right. The Lord of Poop. That's what Beelzebul sounds like in Hebrew. So you can imagine this scene. The Israelites go up to these guys who are doing really bad stuff to worship this evil pagan god, and they say, who exactly are you worshiping? And they can kind of understand each other, and the worshipers say, we are worshiping the Lord of Poop. All right, now, the Israelites obviously thought that was striking or maybe hilarious. I don't know. And so they took this particular name of this one god, and they used it to refer to all of these sort of evil local gods in the region, and eventually it became just a term that was synonymous with Satan. So Beelzebul just means like Satan, like the devil, like evil, the leader of the evil spiritual forces. Okay, that was an aside. So you Beelzebul guys, sorry. Let me see it again. Beelzebul. Hands in the air, come on. Okay, so Jesus is driving out demons. So we've seen this before. Earlier we went through all the stories of what Jesus did in this book of Luke, the things that he actually did. And one of the things we saw repeatedly is that Jesus would do something absolutely amazing right in front of people. And it was undeniable, right? I mean, if he heals someone who's been crippled their whole life, or he takes a person who's never been able to speak, and he goes up to them and prays for them, and all of a sudden they can talk. Or someone's dead, literally they're dead, and he brings them back to life. Or someone's been addicted to alcohol or in a really awful lifestyle their whole life, and they meet Jesus, and all of a sudden they're perfectly normal. They've overcome that completely. People see these kinds of things happen, and some people turn and then decide to follow Jesus and do whatever he says. And other people say, you're bad. You're doing this by spiritual evil. They see something that's massively good and they call it evil. So this is the first group of people, the opponents, these bad guys over here on your right. These opponents, these are people who have seen Jesus do something absolutely amazing, and they look at it and say, no, this is actually evil. And the reason they do this is because they don't want Jesus to be who he says he is. They don't want it to be true that this is actually the Son of God. Because if it's true, they're going to have to do what he says, and they don't want to do what he says. Okay, so Jesus actually, the next thing, Jesus starts to interpret what's happening. And so let's look at Jesus' response to these people. This is mostly his response to this first group of people. So this is starting now at verse 17. So Jesus knew their thoughts. So he knew what these people were thinking, these opponents. And so he said to them, any kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and a house divided against itself will fall. If Satan is divided against himself, how can his kingdom stand? I'm saying this because you claim that I'm driving out demons by the power of Satan, by Beelzebul. If I drive out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your followers drive them out? So then, they will be your judges. But if I drive out demons by the finger of God, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own house, his possessions are safe. But when someone stronger attacks and overpowers him, he takes away the armor in which the man trusted and divides up the plunder. So here Jesus comes with a very simple, straightforward teaching to the opponents to say to them, look, I'm trying to help you. It can't possibly be, if something amazingly good happens, right? I'm driving out the power of Satan. Evil is being defeated. It can't possibly be the power of evil that's doing that work. Because any house, any organization, any nation, any household that's divided against itself will fall. If Satan were driving out himself, then Satan would be no more. We wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. And then he gives this illustration of a strong man and a stronger man. And this is very important for understanding the next section, what Jesus is about to teach. So what he's saying here is he's describing Satan as a strong man who owns a house. So he's thinking of a household here. So not just like your home, but a household with many servants and all kinds of people and things going on in the household. So Satan is the strong man who controls it. And he's powerful. He's got armor. So here Jesus is imagining actually the whole world as under the control of evil, under the control of Satan. Satan is the strong man, but he says if someone stronger shows up, who's the stronger person? Jesus is the one. Here he's describing himself. If someone who's actually stronger, more powerful than Satan shows up, that's the only way that Satan's going to be defeated. But if someone stronger than Satan shows up, he can defeat Satan, take away his armor, bind him, tie him up, and then take all the things that were under the control of Satan, all the things in the house, all the people in the household, and bring them out and set them free. That's what we were talking about in that last song that we were singing. Jesus can set you free. All right. Let's talk about then the second and third people before we go into the next section of teaching. And here I'm going to draw two different verses as Jesus is about to begin to speak to. He's spoken to the opponents. He said to them, look, it's not that it's not obvious. It's obvious that what I'm doing is good and it's from God, but you just really don't want to believe this. Look, it's clear that if I'm driving out evil, it must be by the power of God. And now he's going to begin to speak to two other groups of people who are present in that crowd. Okay, so first, come back with me to just verse 16, which I already read. He's talking about the people who are in the crowd, and he says this. This is right after he talks about the opponents who are saying it's by the power of Satan he's driving out Satan. Here he says in verse 16, others tested him by asking him for a sign from heaven. Now think about this for a minute, guys. Jesus has been, this is partway through this whole story. Jesus has done a lot of things at this point, hasn't he? He's been driving out demons. He's been healing people left and right in full public view of thousands of people. At this point, he's already fed 5,000 people with just a couple of loaves of bread. He's done a whole string of miracles that are public, not things that were just done at his house or in just a church service somewhere. And these people have just watched, they've just seen one. They've just seen him take someone who could never speak, and all of a sudden he could speak. And they turn back and they say, Jesus, we want to follow you, but we're not sure. We got to see some kind of sign from heaven. You got to prove yourself that you're actually from God. What's your response to that? Are you freaking kidding me? Are you kidding me? If you can look at that. You can look at what Jesus has just done and then ask for a sign from heaven. What does that say about what's going on inside those people? Do they want to believe that Jesus is who he says he is? They're just like the opponents, aren't they? The only difference here is their response. Instead of responding by saying, oh, well, he's evil, so I don't have to follow him, they respond by saying, oh, well, we're just not sure. We're just not sure if he really is who he says he is. He's proved himself to them over and over again, and they keep on saying we're not sure because that allows them to not have to do what Jesus wants them to do. That allows them to get out of it. They're not unsure. They're not really unsure. Really what they are is undecided. That's the second group of people. All right, who wants to be the undecided crew? Yeah, all right. In the middle. So undecided crew, you're going to go like this. And say, I don't know. Okay, so you guys are the undecided crew. You're pretending. You really do know that Jesus is the Son of God and that he is who he says he is, but you're pretending that you don't know so that you don't have to do what he says. Man, shame on you. Don't do that. Okay. You're welcome. Okay, and then let's look at the third group of people. So now we're going to turn to the end of this section, and we'll read this again in a few minutes. But in the end of the section, let's look at verse 27. All right? Verse 27 says this, as Jesus was saying all these things, a woman in the crowd called out, blessed is the mother who gave you birth and nursed you. Blessed is the mother who gave you birth and nursed you. So, Jesus has just done this amazing miracle. And some people in the crowd are his opponents. Opponents, give me the Beelzebul. Some people in the crowd are undecided. Give me the, I don't know. Okay? And some people in the crowd respond by cheering for Jesus. Okay, that's who you guys get to be. You don't get a choice this time. So you guys are the fans. All right, give me your loudest fan cheer for Jesus. Okay, so here's the thing about the fans. They respond by saying, yay, Jesus, yeah, go, Jesus, go, Jesus. But they're sitting on the sideline. They're not actually doing any of what Jesus says to do. They just sit there cheering for him. But they think by cheering loud enough that they're going to look like, they're doing what Jesus says. They're going to look like followers of Jesus, and then they'll be able to get out of what Jesus wants them to do. They're not actually doing what he says. They're just cheering for him really loud. Shame on you two. I can't believe it. So you see here in all three groups of people, so this is the third point that you got there. You can write in. There are three groups of people in this story. The opponent, the undecided, and the fans. Okay? And the heart of all three groups of people is just the same. They have all seen Jesus do incredibly powerful things. They really know. They're not admitting it to themselves, but they really know that he is who he says he is. And they're all finding a way to get out of having to follow him, of having to do the things he says to do, even though it would be so much better for them if they did. But they don't want to because it's hard. Don't we do that with so many things in life? Okay. And to this, Jesus comes and responds with what is the center of this section of teaching and what is going to sound like a really harsh word from Jesus. Verse 23, Jesus says this, whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. Jesus looks at these three groups of people, and he leaves them no room. The main point of the message this morning is that there is that neutral ground. Sort of thinking, I'm not sure, I'm remaining undecided about Jesus, or I kind of like him. Neutral ground is a dangerous illusion. Jesus says, whoever is not with me is actually against me. And the second part of the verse explains the first. Whoever does not gather with me scatters. What is he talking about? Gather with me scatters. The word gather here is a word that they used about the harvest. Going out and doing the work of bringing in the harvest. Whoever's not gathering in with me is actually scattering. What Jesus is saying here is that if you are not actively involved in the mission that he's involved in, what he's doing in the world, helping to defeat evil, bring people into light and truth, if you're not actively involved in that, then you are actually fighting against it. You're actually pushing people away from him. That's what he's saying. Why is Jesus so harsh? Do you guys ever feel like Jesus is just really hard on us? No? You don't ever feel like that? Okay. Well, he is kind of harsh. And why is he so harsh all the time? Why does he make it so black and white? You know, it's interesting. He has this verse here. Whoever is not with me is against me. Whoever does not gather with me scatters. Just 2 chapters before this, in chapter 9 and verse 24, there's a verse where Jesus is talking to his disciples. And he says, if someone is not against you, he's with you. It almost seems like he says the opposite in that verse. Whoever is not against you is with you, he says there. But here he says, if you're not with me, you're against me. And what this is all about, it's all about whether or not you are on the same mission that Jesus is on. Like I said at the beginning, and like we said back at Christmas, Jesus came into the world to declare war on evil, to actually overthrow it and completely defeat it. And that's the mission that he's on. He's not messing around here. He's not wandering around the countryside of Galilee randomly. He is waging war on evil, and you see that's what he's doing in this passage. He's finding people who are in desperate need of help, and he's helping them. He's showing people how to love each other. He's changing lives. He's healing people. He's on that mission. And if you're not on it, then you are against him. That's what he's saying. In chapter 9, when he had said this sort of opposite statement, it was about a person who was actually on mission with Jesus. It just was a person from a different church. Jesus was telling his disciples, it doesn't matter what group, what church group you belong to. It's not about cliques or factions. It's just about the work. It's about the mission that I'm on. If you're on that mission, then you're with me. If you're not, then you're actually against me. How can we understand this? There are certain situations in life where there is neutral ground. And I would say those situations are most situations, right? Like, you know, whatever you're doing, if you're a fan of something, we had the Super Bowl a couple of weeks ago, right? And so we had, who played in that Super Bowl? I can never remember these things. Some kind of bird and some Americans, right? The birds versus the Americans. All right. Now, most people were against the Americans. That's odd. Okay. Most people were against the Patriots, right? But, you know, there could be such a thing, not in my house because Amber would get really mad at you. There could be such a thing as neutral ground in that Super Bowl, right? There could be people like me who say, I don't really care who wins the Super Bowl, right? And it doesn't matter. Neutral ground is a possibility. But there are some situations in life that do not permit neutral ground. Let me show you what I mean. Let's suppose we're all sitting here in this gymnasium today. Let's suppose that all of a sudden there's an earthquake. All right? Everybody shake a little bit in your chair. Again, I'm trying to keep you awake. Suppose there's an earthquake. Now, that's going to happen someday in Vancouver. I don't know if it's 200 years or right now, but it's going to happen someday. And let's suppose in that earthquake, all the exits to this room all get blocked by falling debris. Okay? So the earthquake ends, but we're all stuck in here. We're blocked in the room, and we can see that the building at some point soon is going to collapse. The building is about to collapse. And then there's going to be aftershocks, and probably if we stay here, we're all going to die. And so somebody gets up. Maybe, I don't know, who's the most active in this room? Who's going to take charge in here? All right, Dale. Dale got his hand up first. So Dale gets up, and he's like, let's get on board. We got to clear one of these exits. And a whole bunch of us start following Dale and trying to clear that exit. This is a situation that allows for no neutral ground. If you at that moment decided to be Dale's opponent, I don't think we should do that. I think we should do something else. You are actively fighting against everyone in this room, and you are endangering our lives, aren't you? If you at that moment decided, I'm feeling bored, I'm lazy, I don't want to help clear the door right now, is that an okay thing to do in that situation? No, you are actually harming everyone else in the room by what you're doing, because you could have helped us escape faster, and we don't know when the ceiling's going to fall in. There's a situation that permits no neutral ground. I mean, imagine a similar situation. Jesus is talking here with the strong man and the stronger man about a situation that involves war in some way. Imagine that, let's come up with a scenario where, let's say, a terrorist group or some kind of enemy army. I know it's kind of far-fetched, but let's say they surrounded Surrey. Okay? Let's say Surrey was under siege. Now, Surrey is huge. How would you ever surround Surrey? But let's say it was possible. They surrounded Surrey, and nobody could get out. And we knew their goal was eventually to kill everyone in Surrey. That was their goal. Okay? And you were stuck here. And we had somebody in here. Who in the room is most like Rambo? Come on, get your hand in the air. Tim? Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah. 5-round operator. All right, so Tim is like, he's like Rambo, right? And he is getting ready. He's got all these weapons, and he's getting a group ready to fight back. Okay? Now everybody in Surrey knows they're going to die. If you at that moment decided not to join in and help Tim and his insurrectionists take out the siege of Surrey, you would be actively against everyone who's in Surrey. You would be allowing the enemy to come in and do whatever he wants. If you tried to say, no, Tim shouldn't do that, if you were his opponent, or even if you just stood on the sideline and said, go Tim, but you didn't help him. He was like, he didn't have enough food, and you were like, I don't have anything to spare, sorry. Or, he needed something to help wage this war, and you wouldn't give it to him. You would be the enemy of everyone in Surrey. There are some situations in life that do not permit neutral ground. It's not that Jesus is saying, I don't want there to be neutral ground, or there shouldn't be any neutral ground. He's saying that the situation is such that there cannot be neutral ground. It doesn't exist. And what Jesus is saying is that is the situation of the entire world right now. There is a spiritual battle going on in the world. There is evil forces trying to destroy not just the life, but the soul of every human being in the world. And Jesus has come into the world, and he's here right now by the power of his Holy Spirit, and he is waging war on the enemy. He is setting people free, and he is not messing around. This is a mission, and he is not going to turn to the right or to the left, because he loves you. He loves everyone, and he is going to do everything in his power, and he has the power to set us free. And so the question, why he says, if you're not with me, you're against me. If you're not gathering in, if you're not on my mission, you're scattering. He says it because there is no neutral ground. Either you're helping him in that mission, or if you're not, even if you don't mean to be his enemy, if you're not on that mission with him, you are his enemy. Because just by the fact that you're not helping him, you are pushing people away from him and into darkness. That's what he's saying. Every single person in this room influences the people around them. By what you do, by what you say, by how you are. We talked about this morning in baby dedication how, of course, it's the parents, not just their teaching, but more than their teaching, it's what? Their example that will most influence their children. And that's true for your life and the people that you know. The people that you know will be most influenced by you, by your example. If you are on the mission of Jesus, if you are helping him, have joined him in the mission to reclaim the world from evil, then you will be gathering people into him, bringing people into the light, helping people be set free from evil. If you are not, even if you're just sitting there and doing nothing, or even if you're coming to church and you're saying, Jesus, 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 but you're not doing the mission, you are actively pushing people away from him by your example. That's what he's saying. Look at this last section. We're almost done here. Look at the last section. Let me read verses 27 and 28 for you now. Look at how he ends it, speaking to this woman who was so excited about him. She was so pumped. I mean, this is a blessing in her culture. This is like saying, Jesus, you're the most awesome. You're the greatest. You're the best I've ever seen. She says, he's saying these things, and she says, blessed is the mother who gave you birth and nursed you. And Jesus replies to her, no. Blessed instead are those who hear the word of God and obey it. It's not just being a fan that gets you the blessing, that gets you the life that Jesus, the abundant life that he has for you. It's actually joining him in that mission. I'm going to leave you with just a couple of questions as the band comes back up, and then we'll have a time of singing some songs and worship. 3 questions for you. Again, remember that this message was not to people who genuinely aren't sure yet if God is real, or who genuinely aren't sure if Jesus is the Son of God. If that's you, that's not who he's talking to here. He's not saying that you're his enemy. You can find out, and you need to find out. We'll help you with that. If you keep asking him, he will respond to you. But he's talking to people who actually really know. God has already done powerful work in your life. You've seen him work in the lives of other people around you. You know that Jesus is who he says he is. But you're either his opponent, or you're pretending that you're undecided. You're pretending that you don't know. Or you're just sitting there as his fan on the sidelines. And to those people, those 3 groups of people, I'll leave you with this question. Number 1, do you even see the battle that's going on around you? I've described the world as a battle between evil and good, between God and the power of evil, the power of Satan. Do you even recognize that that's happening around you? If not, look, it's all around. Are you in the battle? Question number 2, are you in the battle, or are you sitting on the sidelines? And question number 3, are you his critic? Are you his opponent? Are you undecided? Or are you his fan? Or are you really a person who is on the mission of Jesus? Because that is the only safe place to be. Let's worship.